Hello everybody, welcome to ICC's Game of the Day. I'm Grandmaster Joel Benjamin, and today I have action for you from round 8 of the Sinquefield Cup from St. Louis, Missouri. Tournament that has most of the top players in the world, and coming into today's action, Levon Aronian found himself with a clear 1-point lead on the rest of the field with 4 pursuers trailing 1 point behind him. So let's take a little bit of a look at Aronian's game today, where he played Anand, and we'll just get right into that. He had white, and it was an English opening. And the theory of it is a little bit interesting because it's a position that was debated many years ago between the two killer Ks, Karpov and Kasparov. And I believe it was this move E3 that was pioneered back then in the games. White could take it or he could play D3. But here, Vichy just played the traditional capture on F3, D5. And this continuation was somewhat unfamiliar to myself and John Watson as we were broadcasting the show today. It seems like White is kind of getting a nice game as he gets control of the center and without really giving up too much. But very interesting decision occurred at this moment. Vichy probably expecting Aronian to move his queen away, which seems to be likely to be better for White. Maybe Black has some ideas of undermining the center with B4, but a very interesting pawn sacrifice with E5. If the queen retreats, queen C5 will be strong. So Anand decided to take the queen and to accept this pawn sacrifice, which looks somewhat promising for White. To defend it, Black has to put the knight on the side of the board. And then White takes this open file, and it looked like White had quite good compensation for the pawn, but somehow it didn't really materialize into anything. Anand was able to kind of defend the queen side, and suddenly in this position they went for this repetition. But as I was watching, as we were watching John Watson and myself, we kind of thought that White had a pretty good plan of putting this pawn to A5, knight to C5, and pawn to A6, with the idea of maybe invading with rook on B7. And White seems to have pretty good compensation for the pawn. Well, definitely good compensation, but maybe worth playing on, as if Black isn't careful, he could certainly lose the pawn on D5. But I think that Aronian went for this repetition draw because, after all, he is a point ahead, and once it starts getting into a situation where it's a little unclear where things are going to go, he just didn't want to take a chance. He wanted to make sure that he went into the last round with at least some kind of lead, even though at this point it seemed that Carlsen was in very good shape against Nakamura. Now, before we take a look at that game, I want to take a brief look at the game between Giri and Caruana. Okay, so we're going to pick up the action well into the game. Giri at some point went from being a pawn up very briefly to a pawn down, and he's been playing a pawn down for a while, although admittedly it's not a great pawn, this pawn at B7 with the black knight stuck on the side of the board defending it. But at this point we thought Black had an interesting opportunity to play knight to C6, or actually probably even one move before. He could start with knight C6 here, followed by bringing the knight to D4 and trying to get some kind of mating net, something like takes, knight D4, then knight E5 would force Black's hand, and there could be something like check, king G3, and it seemed like Black knight F5, White would be able to defend, but maybe king F6. This position was looked kind of tricky, that Black might try to weave some kind of mating nets. But Caruana went for something a little bit different. He went for